easiest one. So we've already decided, therefore, that when we save it, we need to have an entity, which means that we can pass in the status like this, and that will become the entity that we want to save. Okay, now we want to do something in order to save that. Let's pretend that we already have the connection. So let's say we have connection db con. And from here we can then you can then run a query, and then you can execute that query. So let's go and write this out. This isn't going to be the place where all of this whole is held, but for now, we'll just work through it. So okay. Now there's a couple of ways you can do a PDO insert query. You could do different placeholders. For example, you could do positional placeholders. You could do a prepare statement. You could do named placeholders. You could do you could insert multiple things. So insert multiple rows. We only want to be inserting one thing. And I think we're going to be working through positional placeholders because that's kind of more abstract. I think. The first thing we do need to do, however, is we actually do need to write the query. Okay, so let's just remove that and change that to SQL. And of course, there's two queries that you need to consider when you're actually saving an entity. First is that you're inserting data, and the second is that you're updating data. And I guess the joy is that because we have the entity, we can actually see whether there is an ID hydrated upon this. And if there is, then we would assume that that is an updation. You're updating an updation. Is that a word? You're updating. Whereas if you don't have an ID, then you could make the assumption that you're actually inserting. So let's just write this out as a string here. So let's write both of them out. So let's do SQL insert, right? And then let's just do SQL update. Now I'll refactor all of this out later. Don't you worry about that. That's no problem. Okay. So we're dealing with the status, and what we could do as a quick sort of like cheat sheet, we could go back to the MySQL here and have a look at the schema of the status, because that will give us all the bits and pieces that we need in order to add a record to this database, to this table. So let's copy that, go into the status manager here, and then let's just copy that in. Okay, so when we're inserting, we need to have the insert field. Field is the keyword? I don't know. Insert and then into. And then you put in the name of the table that you want to insert into, obviously. So in this case, it's going to be status. And then you can start filling out the values. So the values here are going to be in some brackets. We're going to have, if we're inserting, we don't have the ID. So we're going to have name. We're going to have, internal name. Let's just make this a little bit smaller so I can make a little bit more, put more on the screen. Internal name. And then we can have the date created and the date updated. Now we don't need to worry about these because can you see here that we have on default we're running the current timestamp, and on update we're on update, we are updating the current timestamp, so we don't need to worry about that. So these are the only two things that we do need to care about, the name and the internal name, when we're inserting. Now, obviously, when we're updating, we have to do other things as well. But we haven't finished this yet because we have to pass in the values. So we do values. Like that. And what we're doing is, because we're using positional placeholders, we are saying that these are at these specific placeholders. So there's only two placeholders, the name and the internal name. So we do question mark and then question mark here. Okay, this will all become a little bit clearer in just a second, don't you worry. Then what we do is we do the, let's say we got the connection. I should have saved this before, dbcon. We first of all, we do a prepare, and we pass in the SQL that we want to prepare. And then we can do a dbcon, and it's a execute. And in the execute mechanism, we pass in an array of all of the placeholders that we want to add. So in this case, we have name and we have the internal name. These will correspond to these question marks. So remember, we've passed in the entity, which is the status one, so we can pull that out. So we could do now these are these are not in, these aren't this isn't an associated array. This is just indexed by numeric, so we don't need to worry about the keys. So the first one is the name, so we can do entity, and then we do get name. And then of course the next one is entity, and then it's get internal name. Okay. Let's just save that. So that's the execution of the insert query. Now the update query is slightly different. Let's just and obviously let's end that with that. The update query is slightly different because you've already got the ID. So you don't want to be inserting a new record. You want to be updating. Updating status, and then you want to be updating all of these things where and then you put in the ID is equal to an ID. So in this case, this will be a question mark. So it's slightly different here. What we want to do is not pass in a list of values. We want to be passing in some sets. So we're going to set the name to equal question mark. And because it's coming off of the screen here, what I think I might do is well, there's only two things. I'll leave it as is. So we set name, and then we also want to set internal name, and that also equals to a question mark. So in this case, we have three parameters. We have the name, we have the internal name, and we have the ID here. And to do that, we would just put in this, and then we would update the other bits and pieces as well. I just want to double check. Oops. Excuse me. Whoopsie. So we do update, then status, and then we set the name to question mark, and we don't need to have a space here. And then set the internal name. In fact, we only need one set, so we could do just a space here. So we're setting the internal name, comma, so not space, comma, then internal name, and then we're doing a where clause, so I can remove that space. ID is equal to question mark. So we've got three question marks here, which means that we need to have three things going on here. Now, ideally, obviously, we want to only run one statement. We don't want to be faffing about with all of this stuff. This needs to be refactored quite a heavy bit because and the save routine shouldn't be. We shouldn't say whether or not it should be an update or an insert, because it should only work upon whether or not the entity has an ID. So, for example, what we should do is we should have SQL is equal to U, or SQL is equal to that. And then we should have an array of data. So this means that we need to make a decision as to whether or not this is going to be inserting or updating, and then we need to get the corresponding SQL and the corresponding data as well. So in this case, the data here would be a data of an array, data equals array, where we are passing in the entity, get name, and this obviously needs to be in order, entity, get internal name, or if we are updating the query rather than running the insert, we do all the same things before, but we also need a third one, because you can see we got a third question mark here, and the third one here is entity get ID. And then what we do after we've made the decision as to which one we want to choose, we then run this prepare statement. So therefore, let's get rid of all of this stuff. I don't need that yet, or at the moment. We do an if statement, so we can do if entity get ID, and what we could do, let's say that's going to be returning as null, so that's fine. So if null 1 2 3 is equal to that, then we want to run an insert, else we want to run an update. Now the problem here with this simple, I shouldn't say simple, never is, with this conditional here, we have a problem, because there's too much code going on in this manager. Really what I want to do, and this is going another level of refactoring really, is having an ability of setting this up so this becomes a routine in itself, and then that routine returns the SQL and the data and then puts it in here. Obviously that becomes tricky, because then you're having to return two things, the SQL and the data. I could perhaps return an array, a collection of things, but because you can only obviously return one thing from a function, from a method, that might prove a bit tricky. The danger here is that we're going to have in the manager an awful lot of code. This is why I've put the find one in the repository rather than in the manager. So maybe there needs to be some sort of way of building queries, or something. I don't know. I need to think on this. Okay, so the next challenge, therefore, is getting the connection into this thing, which is a bit of a challenge. If we have a look at the way everything is hanging together, we have the DB that has connection, that it just returns a static. That return that you have to instantiate that, and then you run open, but that returns a static PDO thing. I'm not sure whether I want to just inject the whole thing into here. I'm not too sure yet. I haven't decided. The abstract manager, let's have a look at that. That just has the find one. Yeah. Okay, so I could essentially create a constructor in here. So we're going to do a public function construct, and we could pass in the connection. This is connection, and I could do whoops, sorry, I needed to do a private However, I don't like this. I don't like this. But for this example, I think it's probably best if we just continue on. My mind is like thinking 4 stages ahead, which might be a bit confusing on screen. So let's do this. Connection is equal to connection. And then down here, what we can do is we can do this connection prepare, and this, whoopsie, come on, this connection execute. Cool. Obviously, sorry. What I needed to do is open the connection first. Going a bit ahead of myself. db con is equal to this connection open. There we go. Because now we've opened the connection and we can prepare that statement, and we can run the execute. Okay. Have I got that the wrong way? Ah, yes, it's exe, not sorry, forgive me. It's exe rather than that. Whoops. You must forgive me. It's been a while since I've actually fiddled with this because in my day-to-day work, it's we're mostly using Doctrine and other things like that, which do all this for you. So yeah. So the prepare is preparing that SQL. So if you have a look in here, the documentation. So this must be valid SQL statement for the target database server, passing on all that jazz. You pass in the statement and then perhaps some driver options if you wanted to. You don't have to if you've already set that up. And then it returns a PDO statement if the database server was successfully prepares a statement. And then I think is it false if not? Something like that, returns false, depending on error handling. I mean, that's something that we haven't even discussed yet, is error handling of this. So we might have to do that at some point. It depends, how this gets on. And then there's a warning here that PDO prepare doesn't check the statement, so we're not worrying about that because we're not doing it through staticness. And then here in the execute, that then executes the statement. Excuse me. Okay. I think that is enough to play around with, which is good. I'm going to now run this through the index controller. So in here, let's go to the home. Let's just run it on home. So we extend the abstract controller and we don't have anything in here yet. So we could inject the whole service in. So we could do that. Or we could just call it, we could just instantiate it. I think I'm probably more, just to get a test example working, I think I'm going to just instantiate it just to get something to actually go into the database. So let's do, first of all, we need a connection. So because we need to inject that into the service itself. So let's do database, or let's do connection is equal to new connection. Let's then do manager is equal to new status manager. And now we need to inject the dependency of the database connection into here. Now we can do manager save. Okay. So first of all, we can start building. I mean, I could just do this in a test, right? I could just do this in this could just be a test. So we do status equals new status entity. Status set name is test. Set internal name is just test, like that. And then what we want to do is save that. So in theory, if we've done everything correctly, or if I've done everything correctly, then this is the mechanics of all of this. One would hope that this whole thing is somehow injected into the constructor at some manner, and you know, we're now moving into the realms of containers, dependency containers, which I don't really necessarily want to get really bogged down in, because that becomes a challenge. But essentially, that is pretty much the way it'll go. Whether or not this works first run, I very much doubt it. I might have to just take this offline and have a fiddle, because we've done an awful lot of stuff here. Okay, we've got. Let's see though. I'm just going to grab a cup of tea. See, the time is moving on a little bit faster than I would have liked as well. But let's attempt it. So we're just going to do an eval of that, because there's other things that I want to show today before I shoot off. So we've done an eval, so which means that we should have docker ps-a. Do I need to bring any of these containers back up? Yes, I do. So let's just make sure we're in the right place. We are. Let's do a think. What am I doing? A Docker compose. That's what I'm doing. Too many technologies. Docker compose down. So we're going to bring all this down, and then we're going to do an up -d. Bring them up again. Woohoo! Okay. Let's see. First of all, can we dive into the MySQL container? And I can't remember what the database name's called. It is invoice app, so we're going to use that invoice. We have a table, I believe, called status, so we're going to do a select all from status, and I believe that we do have these in here. The idea is that we want to insert test somehow. Whoops. Okay. Let me just check a couple of things. Bear with me just a second. I'm actually quite nervous when I do these things, because it's like, you know, normally when I do a course, I test all of this stuff out, and then I do the course. Now I'm just doing it ad hoc. So you're kind of learning with me a little bit. And I know that the time is moving on, and I do need to crack on and get stuff done. It's 8:16 in the morning in England. So you know, it's getting on. I say getting on. This is probably really early for a lot of people, and you know, a lot of people might be watching this at different times. This is actually going to be archived on YouTube, and I actually put out the previous one, number 26, this morning on YouTube, and I'm going to try and keep them like at least a day behind, probably more, depending on timescales. It does take a long time to do all of this stuff. Anyway, I'm diverting. I shouldn't be talking about all of this stuff. I need to actually crack on and see this stuff. So it is 192.168.99.100. That is the shebang. And let's do that. No. Yeah, so that never went in. So what I did is I went to the browser. I put in 192.168.99.100. That is the website that this application runs from using the Docker machine. Hoping that when we get onto the index page of the home, we run all of this stuff. But obviously this never actually happened. So something went bang at some point. Although it didn't go bang because I didn't get a white screen of doom. If we go into the save routine, something did go bang, didn't it? Something went bang, bang, bang. It's because we haven't actually pushed in the data. Oh, what a moron. Look at this. Look at this for stupidity of code. Don't worry, I'm very self-critical. I like calling myself stupid. It's a pastime of me. So see all these undefined, these unused variables here, data and data. We actually need to pass these in, don't we? As data. Whoops. And again, if I had error reporting, if this was error reporting, this might. Is that the right thing? We need to pass that in. It puts in the state. I'm not sure if that's correct. I don't think that's correct, because that is statement. Data inside the query should be properly escaped. It's a string, the SQL statement to prepare and execute. So this isn't really what I should be doing here. Yeah, that's not good, is it? That's not what I'm after. That's not what I'm after. Okay, my mind is at a blank as to how I need. You can see that that's screwed up. Maybe they've changed, or maybe I just I've totally forgotten. I wanted to use placeholders. I think there needs to be a level above the statement to actually inject the placeholders in. Oops. I guess like what I could do is run the binds. That might work. Yeah, I kind of need to bind that to this, and obviously, whoops. Something that I have totally forgotten to do here is this prepares the statement that prepares the statement, which returns, as I did show you, but I just didn't acknowledge that actually returns an object that you can bind parameters to and bind values to, which then has the ability to run the execute. So yeah, I do apologize. This isn't what I should have done before. I can't even say my words today. It's because I haven't had enough tea. This is what I should have been doing. So the execute here does the execute a prepared statement, and of course you're preparing that statement and you're passing in the input parameters. So, okay, let's go back to here, go back into there. Let's have a little look and see. So we don't need to do any of this. Bye-bye. Statement, we get the database connection. Making sure it's open. We then prepare that, and then all that good stuff. Okay, so let's have another stab at this. Yay! Wow. Okay. So let me just grab my tea and I'll tell you what I've done. Okay, so what's going on here is that you can see the fourth row here has been added, test. So that kind of works in the sense that we can now save from the controller. Let's just ensure that we can do an update. So I'm going to do set ID. We're going to set that ID to be 4 because that is the ID of this row. And whoops, I want to change this row here, test, to be foo on foo. And then we go to the browser, we refresh the page. I then have a panic because I can't find the right button to get back to the code. Which is here. We did an up on that, select all from status, and we've changed it to be foo. So